Hey, good evening, everybody. Hey, folks, I'm excited to get on tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Troy, and I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm going to be talking about a very important topic that is affecting 93% of us. And the crazy part is most people don't even know what insulin resistance is. And so if you're struggling with your health in some way, this information could change your life. And if there's somebody that you know, that you love and care about that needs to hear this, feel free to share this with them so that they could hop on, they can listen, they can ask questions. Okay. Before I really get started, if you guys wouldn't mind, drop your location in the chat. I'm always curious where people are tuning in from. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, drop your location in the chat. All right. Bambi, what part of Arizona are you in? Okay. It's a good area. Flagstaff is beautiful. I live in Mesa, but I've been to Flagstaff many times. When I was younger, I used to go there to go snowboarding a lot. But thank you to everyone who is hopping on. I really do appreciate that. So I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. And, you know, as Solomon said in the Bible, in all you're gaining, gain understanding. And let me tell you, when you understand insulin resistance, it changes everything because it helps you to know what you can start to do to improve your health. Miss Scarlett, hey, thank you so much for hopping on. How are you doing? And so, folks, if you're eating better, maybe you're exercising more, and you're still struggling with weight, energy, or labs that won't improve, I hope that you'll stay here. Okay. Tonight, I want to talk to you about something that is affecting 93% of us. It's insulin resistance. I'm going to talk about what it actually is, why it's behind almost every chronic issue that we're seeing today, and most importantly, what you can do to fix it. And so if you've ever struggled with your weight, maybe you're tired all the time, fatigue. Thank you, Miss Scarlett. Okay, how many of you struggle with brain fog or cravings, especially late at night? How many of you have diabetes or high cholesterol or high blood pressure? If that's you, type me in the chat. It helps me to know how many people are affected by this. Okay, and so I want you guys to understand that this live is educational. Okay, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not treating, I'm sharing education. Okay, and that's what I want to bring to the table. I'm going to explain how the body responds to insulin and food and timing. Because most people, in my opinion, most people were taught wrong information. Now, I nearly lost my life a couple different times because I had this so bad. Some of you know my story, but back in November, of 2014, I I donated a kidney to my sister's husband, and I'm very honored to have been able to have the opportunity to do that. But it was 7 years later. So this was November of 2014. It was actually 7 years later when I was diagnosed with kidney disease. And my nephrologist said, "Troy, if you don't lose if you don't lose weight or if you don't change your diet, you're going to end up on dialysis or worse." And I'm not going to lie, this freaked me out. Okay. Because I've always been healthy. How many of you feel like, you've always been really healthy, um, but, you're doing all the right things and you just can't seem to get ahead? I mean, how many of you feel that way? Thank you. I appreciate that. So, the scary part, folks, is that most people don't even know that they have it because it's rarely tested for. It's a major driver of heart disease, which is the leading cause of death worldwide. Now, for those of you that have never been on one of my lives, okay, I spent a lot of time teaching people on metabolic health, specifically insulin resistance. And because I've seen what happens when it goes unchecked. Mom Chilm, I appreciate that. I love everyone. Okay. And so I'm somebody that I dealt with stage 4 kidney disease. Seriously. I've lost family members early. And what shocked me is that diabetes didn't even run in my family. And so this isn't about willpower, okay? It's about understanding your body. A lot of people are actually told to eat less and move more. How many of you have ever been given that advice? We often get that from our doctor or nutritionist or, dietitian, right? We call this the calories in, the calories out approach, okay? But here's the reality. If your insulin levels stay high, the body stores energy instead of using it. Okay, we're going to talk about this for a second, okay? And this is why effort doesn't always equal results, right? You guys could be trying everything, and it just doesn't seem to help you, okay? And Joseph, I really appreciate you being on this live, okay? So, folks, if your insulin stays high all day long, you guys realize that it leads to diabetes, it leads to insulin resistance, it leads to cardiovascular disease, okay? All of this, okay? And people who finally see change usually focus on 3 things, okay? 1, they focus on what foods spike insulin. 2, how often we're eating, right? How often do you guys eat? How many of us have been told to have 3 meals a day and to snack 2 to 3 times throughout the day? Well, that advice that we were given back in the 90s is part of the reason why so many of us are sick. And it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. Okay? And so I'm excited to be on here tonight, right? Here's the deal. And Mom Chilm, I appreciate that. Okay? I'm health coach Troy. Okay? If you want to make a big impact in business or life, you need to be able to solve a major problem. And a big problem in the world today is insulin. It's huge. It affects people all over the world. And the information that I'm going to share with you is not something that I can keep to myself. Okay? I'm on a mission to share this with everybody I possibly can and help as many people that need it. Okay? Is there anyone here that is type 2 diabetic? Is there anyone here with PCOS or erectile dysfunction? How many of you have skin issues like skin tags, psoriasis, eczema? Okay, how many of you have heart disease or kidney stones or, for women, PCOS, right? It's a leading cause of infertility for women. How many of you are carrying some extra weight, right? That excess belly fat that you just can't seem to get rid of. Okay. Most people don't realize that you can actually improve this naturally without the need for meds or diets or extreme exercise. And here's the part that no one wants to tell you, not even your doctor. If I go into the doctors because I have IBS and I've got migraines and I have cholesterol issues, and let's say that I go to 3 different doctors, I'm going to pay 3 different copays, and not one of those even touches the real root cause of your health issues. See, all they're doing is managing the numbers, the symptoms. But the moment you come off those, what do you think happens to all of the symptoms that you had? Right? They all come back. Right? How many of you have ever white knuckled the diet for a couple weeks and you've lost some weight and then the moment you stop it, you just gain it all back? So why are we all struggling with this? I want you guys to think about your own health as I talk. Okay. Are you dealing with these things? Okay. And most importantly, do you know what you can do to fix it? Okay. The good news, okay, is that you don't need meds or extreme diets to fix it. Okay. So whether you're dealing with type 2 diabetes or weight issues or anything else, what I'm going to share with you could change your life. Okay. Now, we've been misled when it comes to type 2 diabetes, right? Type 2 diabetes, folks, is not progressive. It's not. It's not a life sentence. It's reversible because insulin resistance is reversible. You have options, you have hope. Okay. So let's talk about insulin for a second. Okay. Insulin is not your friend at all. It's not your friend. Insulin is a fat storing hormone, right? Joseph Orlick sure feels like it, right? Insulin is a big deal. Insulin is what's, the main reason why most of us are sick. How many of you use a CGM, right? How many of you use a CGM? It's a continuous glucose monitor, right? How many of you have those? If you do, would you mind typing CGM in the chat? It helps me to know how many people are using that or have one. So if you wouldn't mind taking a second and typing that in the chat if you're using a CGM. Okay, Joseph, thank you. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up is because I get this question a lot. People are like, well, what about CGMs? Okay. I want you to understand something. CGMs, they don't manage diabetes at all. And here's why. A CGM gives information. Okay, that's it. It gives you information. A CGM, folks, is like a breathalyzer, right? It tells you how drunk you are, but it doesn't cure alcoholism, right? And so information without behavior change changes absolutely nothing. And I always tell people nothing changes if nothing changes. How many of you go into your doctor and your doctor tells you that your labs are normal? Thank you for that comeback, Keith. How many of you go to your doctor and your doctor tells you that your labs are normal, right? But you don't feel normal, right? You still feel sick. And the reality is that normal glucose just means insulin is still working for now. Okay. You know what's interesting? There's actually 2 things that doctors won't test you for. They'll test your blood sugar, they'll test your cholesterol, they'll test your A1C, but you know what? There's 2 tests in humans that doctors will not do. It's your fasting insulin and inflammation. And you guys want to know why doctors don't test your fasting insulin or inflammation? Because there's no prescription for insulin resistance. I want you guys to understand something, that when we go to a doctor, they test what they can medicate. So if you're on a bunch of meds, okay, there's a reason why. Doctors are not teaching you how to fix the root cause. And folks, this is why I share this information with people, okay? Drop a fire emoji in the chat or a thumbs up if this is making sense. I just want to make sure that what I'm sharing is helping you to understand what insulin resistance is, right? And just saying, that's phenomenal, right? If you have a doctor that is talking to you about those things, hold on to that doctor, because the sad reality is that most medical professionals, they're not even talking about this, okay? How many of you have ever heard of diabetes? Not diabetes, but diabetes. How many of you have ever heard of that? And if you haven't, it's okay, okay? Because up until a few days ago, I've never heard of that, okay? So I want you guys to understand that diabetes is it's obesity that is caused by diabetes and insulin resistance, okay? It's crazy. I want you guys to understand that you're not overweight because you're lazy, okay? You're overweight because something's high. Your insulin is high, okay? The key to all of this, folks, is to treat insulin, not your calories, okay? I hope that makes sense. Now, how many of you have ever heard of diabulimia? Okay, this might be something new, okay? Diabulimia is why insulin makes people gain weight. See, a type 1 diabetic, right? They have to incorporate insulin. They have to take insulin in, because without it, they die, right? And so, diabulimia happens when a type 1 diabetic stops insulin because they're trying to lose weight. How many of you, that sounds familiar to you? And the reason why they do this is because insulin causes fat storage. This is basic biology. Your body stores fat when your insulin levels are high. Okay? Folks, I love talking about this. Okay? Insulin, I want you guys to think of insulin resistance like a fire that is burning out of control in your body. Okay? Just like how the symptoms that you and I have, right? The symptoms are the smoke to the fire. So if you're dealing with diabetes or blood pressure, or cholesterol issues, or anything else, that is the smoke to the fire. And folks, we can either choose to put the fire out, or we can just keep sprinkling water on the smoke, hoping that it goes away, and the reality that it doesn't. Is this making sense? I hope it is. I hope it's helping you to get a little synopsis of what causes insulin resistance and why it's affecting so many people. Folks, when we eat sugar and carbs all day long, it leads to high blood sugar spikes, but it leads to high insulin. Biden, good morning. It's good evening here. It's a little after 10 o'clock here in Phoenix. Okay. Folks, if we are eating all day long, what happens is that your blood sugar goes up and down and up and down, and it's constant throughout the day. And there's something that happens at the end of the day, right? If you've been eating all day, it's called hyperinsulinemia. Your body is literally loaded with insulin. You're swimming in it. Okay. I want you guys to remember that insulin's main job isn't blood sugar. It's storage. It is a fat storing hormone. So remember this: when insulin is high, fat burning is off. When insulin is low, fat burning is turned on. Does that make sense? You cannot store fat and burn fat at the same time. Okay. Now, I love this analogy because I think it puts into perspective and helps us to understand in greater detail, right? If you put a chicken, right, in the oven, okay, it goes from pink to brown, okay? You can actually see that meat cooking, right? And that browning process that happens with that chicken, it's called glycation, okay? Glycation is the same thing that happens when you put a piece of bread in a toaster and you toast it, right? It goes from the bread to being toasted, right? What most people don't realize, though, is that from the moment that you and I are born, okay, the human body is actually slowly undergoing the same process on the inside, okay? It's very gradually over time. But this is why the cartilage in babies is white, while in much older adults, it becomes darker. That is accumulated glycation. I'm sure that some of you have probably never heard of it that way. But every blood sugar spike, every time we eat something or we drink something, okay, it accelerates this process because glucose, the sugars, is what drives glycation, okay? Which is why the word sounds so familiar to glucose and glycation, right? More frequent spikes means faster biological aging, right? We're aging faster, okay? We've got more internal wear and tear, right? We've got increased inflammation. And we've got visible signs on our body like wrinkles, right? So we've got the wrinkles, we've got maybe a loss of tissue flexibility. We're not as flexible as we were when we were younger, okay? And what happens is when your glucose spikes, the body responds defensively by releasing insulin, which is a hormone designed to protect our tissues, okay? What happens though is it just gets, this fire gets bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? And this is one of the primary mechanisms behind gaining weight. Okay, how many of you have gained weight and for whatever reason you just can't seem to lose the weight? Okay, I want you guys to understand that it's not a lack of willpower. Okay, it's a protective response to the repeated spikes. Okay, let me see here. And so I love sharing this. You know, my dad unfortunately passed away back in, you know, Easter Sunday 2017, and I'll be honest, it's completely, it's crazy, right? That this, you know, how many family members do we have that have unfortunately passed on way too soon? You know, 54% of our country is either pre-diabetic or type 2, and chronic conditions like obesity and cardiovascular disease and autoimmune disorders, they're skyrocketing, folks. But it's not just physical health, right? Infertility, PCOS, erectile dysfunction, okay? Things like anxiety, right? And Raul, Happy New Year. Appreciate you, okay? And what's frustrating, folks, is that we are often given medications for each individual symptom, but they don't fix the root cause. That's the only reason why I get on these lives, is to help you understand what it is that you can do to start improving your health. You know, I wish a doctor or somebody would have shared this with me 20, 30 years ago. My brother would still be here, my dad would still be here. And I think there's something that I don't think most people realize, is that type 2 diabetes is not inherited. It's not insulin dependent. It is carbohydrate toxicity syndrome. And here's the thing, insulin is a fat storing hormone. That's its job. So when insulin stays high for years because of carbs and sugars, what happens is that our body starts to break down. And here's the truth, okay? As I mentioned before, okay? CGMs don't manage diabetes. They give out information and that's it. Okay? How many of us folks were told that fat was bad and that sugar was fine and that we should eat all day, right? How many of us have been told to have 3 meals a day and to snack 2 to 3 to 4 times a day? That was the advice I received back in the 1990s, long time ago. And I think that that's part of the reason why there's so many people that are affected by this, right? Folks, you and I could walk outside, we can throw a pebble down the street, and we're gonna find at least 10 people that are struggling with this. If you and I, if we went to our family reunion, okay? If we went to a family reunion, both sides of the family are there. We've got our aunts and our uncles, our cousins. How many people there, folks, are struggling with their health? You're going to know at least 10 of them, I'm sure. Now, I want you guys to understand something. I love doctors. We need doctors, right? I'm not anti doctor and I'm not anti medicine, but I'm anti ignoring the root cause. I think it's important for us to understand why we have these health issues. And most importantly, I think it's important to know what we can start to do to improve our health naturally. Does that make sense? And so, how many of you even know that you are insulin resistance? Has your doctor ever talked to you about it? If you wouldn't mind put that in the chat. I'm always curious how many people are aware of this, right? Is your doctor talking to you about this? Just curious if you guys. And guys, thank you so much for hopping on. As you guys tune in, would you guys mind dropping your location in the chat? I always love, you know, being able to connect with people and finding out where they are all over the world. It's, you know, technology today is pretty amazing that we can connect with people. Doris Ramirez, New York, love it. How cold is it in New York right now? South Africa, I love it. That's so cool. Love it. I'm in Arizona. You know, I've been able to connect with people literally all over the world. Okay. And Nanny V, where in Tennessee? So my mom and my sister live right outside of Maryville. In fact, my 84-year-old mom is living in a memory care facility in Tennessee. Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay. Malaysia. Love it. I've always wanted to go there and I never have. But one of these days it's certainly on my bucket list. Okay. Folks, if you've ever been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2, that's a huge red flag. Here's the thing, these symptoms aren't just normal aging, okay? They're signals from your body that something is off, right? And folks, if you are diabetic, do you guys realize that you are 80% more likely to have a heart attack or stroke? You're 81% more likely to have Alzheimer's or dementia. That's what my mom has. It's scary, folks. If that runs in your family, pay attention to that one because I would never wish that upon anyone. Nanny V, love that. Okay. Love it. Tennessee is so beautiful. I spent some time in Murfreesboro, just outside of Nashville for a while too, but it's so beautiful there. I mean, if you've ever been to Arizona, Arizona is kind of like a brown, right? We've got cactuses and we do have forests, but it's not as green as someplace like Tennessee. It's just so beautiful, so blessed, right? So, folks, in November of 2014, right, I donated a kidney to my brother-in-law. I had no idea that 7 years later I would be told by my doctor that I had kidney disease. And I was told that if I didn't lose my weight, if I didn't change some things, that it was dialysis or worse. I mean, how many of you have ever sat across from your doctor and your doctor is telling you, hey, you need to do this and this, and if you don't, right, there's a chance that you could lose, lose a lot of things, right? How many of you have ever been blindsided by a doctor? right? You feel like you're doing everything right, and all of a sudden you're taking 2 steps back. It's crazy, okay? And folks, this is why, I'm so passionate about what it is that I get to do every day, okay? How many of you let me ask you this question. What is the most important meal of the day? What's the most important meal of the day, Miss Scarlett? What do you guys think it is? Okay, Joseph says dinner. Okay, okay. Javon says lunch. Okay. I was always told that breakfast was the most important meal of the day, right? It's the first meal, right? And we get the word breakfast from break fast, right? The reality is the key is what you eat, whether that's at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, because that first meal is what sets the tone for everything else. Hey, Miji. But perhaps breakfast was just a marketing tactic to sell more cereal and bagels, right? How many of you eat cereal first thing in the morning? How many of you have kids that eat cereal first thing in the morning? I'm just curious. Right? This was the corporation that actually created this idea that breakfast was the most important meal of the day, right? In fact, they told us that we were supposed to start our day with carbohydrates first thing in the morning. Do you guys realize that carbohydrates is what actually leads to fat storage and diabetes? Did you know that? And how many of you knew that our food industry, right? That our food industry was literally taking fiber out of our foods, right? How many of you knew that? It's crazy. Fiber is actually something that's really important, right? Our body needs it, and we're actually not getting enough of it. And the food industry back in the 60s and leading into the 80s, they actually started taking it out of our food. And the reason why they did that was to increase the shelf life. I want you guys to remember something. When the shelf life of your food goes up, your lifespan goes down. It's important, folks. It really is. You know, again, I wish that this was information that, was shared with me 20 years ago, right? Our gut microbiome needs fiber. Absolutely, Christine. It really does. And so, and folks, if breakfast is your favorite meal of the day, it's mine too. Okay. But consider eating breakfast for lunch or for dinner. And instead of having breakfast first thing in the morning, drink water, drink black coffee, right? Don't put sugar creams in it, but skip a meal, right? Our body actually reacts better and it runs better when we don't eat first thing in the morning. Most of us don't know that though. Okay. Most of us are used to, waking up and having our coffee with cream and sugar, then we have a bagel or a bowl of cereal. But if that's how we're starting our day, it actually wrecks the rest of your day. Most people don't think about that. Because when you start your day with carbs or sugar, your blood sugar it goes up like a roller coaster, and it's literally like that for the rest of the day. It's crazy, and this is one of the reasons why 74% of our country is overweight or obese. Okay, 74% of adults are overweight. 50% of our kids. 77% of our young adults are actually unfit to serve in the military because of these health issues. Now, if you have a doctor or a medical professional that is talking to you about insulin resistance, hold on to them. Because the sad reality is that most medical professionals, they're not talking about this. Okay. And there's a lot of people, right? How many of you crave food, salt, sugar, especially late at night? You know, fasting is actually one of the quickest ways to regulate your insulin levels. It's the quickest way to actually lower it. And see what happens, folks, is when you go for an extended period of time without putting food in your mouth, is you actually avoid the glucose spike. And when you avoid the glucose spike, you actually avoid the insulin spike, right? It's so important for us to understand what that is, right? And I think that there's a question that I think most people think, that carbohydrates are essential, okay? But they're actually not, okay? And most of us, unfortunately, we eat from sun up to sundown, and we wonder why we have the health issues that we have because people just don't know what they don't know. Okay. So, what's interesting thing to hear that maybe you guys aren't familiar with is, you know, when we go to a doctor, okay, you guys realize that doctors test what they can medicate. Did you know that? Doctors will not perform and provide a test if there's not a prescription for it, which is crazy, right? When you go to a doctor, okay, your doctor measures your glucose levels. Okay. Measuring your glucose levels, folks, is like having a basement in your house that looks dry on the surface, but is actually full of water beneath it. And what's interesting is that there's two tests that doctors actually don't test for. One is fasting insulin, and the other is inflammation. And what's interesting is that we go and we check our glucose levels, but we don't check the one thing that actually controls our blood sugar. Isn't that interesting? Insulin is what controls your blood sugar. Isn't that interesting? And we don't test for it. And the reason why is because there's no prescription for insulin resistance. I think it's important that people understand that. Okay. So if you feel like every time you go to a doctor that, they're just putting you on another med, there's a reason why. Okay. That's why people stay stuck, unfortunately. And this is why I share what I share. Christine, thank you for that. And taken so long. Um, Now, why would you say it's not good? I'm curious as to what you mean by losing the weight is not good. How many of you know why your A1C is high? Okay, do you have a doctor that is explaining why your A1C might be high? Most doctors don't, right? They don't talk to us or explain to us why we're struggling, why we have the health issues that we have. What they usually do is diagnose and treat our symptoms, right? They become really good at that. But folks, if you've ever wondered if type 2 diabetes or neuropathy or skin issues or anything else that you might be struggling with can be improved or reverse, you can. Insulin resistance is something that can be reversed. And Zippo, thank you so much for hopping on. I appreciate that. So, I want to share a story. Dr. Francis Pottinger, okay? He he's passed on, but he was a doctor that actually loved cats. Harshweed, good evening. He absolutely loved cats. And he fed cats three different types of food. He had three different groups. He had one group that he fed raw milk. He had one group that he fed raw meat. And the third group was actually boxed foods, right? The processed food that you and I eat. Well, it's interesting because the cats that were eating the boxed foods, they were hungry all the time. They were tired. They developed cholesterol issues, blood sugar issues. And here's the shocking part. In 3 generations of eating boxed food, right, the processed food that you and I eat, only a third of those cats could reproduce. But the other cats who were eating, the raw meat and the raw milk, they were perfectly fine. It's crazy, right? That what we've been taught when it comes to our health and nutrition, that it's so backwards from what we've been taught back in the 80s and 90s. Okay. How many of you remember the food pyramid? Anybody remember that? We were told to, have 6 to 11 servings every day of grains. We were told to have, 60% of our daily intake should be carbs. Okay. And carbs is what leads to diabetes. It's what leads to Alzheimer's and dementia. And we were told to start our day with these carbs. I mean, how many diabetics were told to not fast and to start their day with oatmeal or oats, right? Folks, we've been misled. Okay, we can be reading from a book, but if we're reading from the wrong book, there's a chance that we're going to stay stuck. And folks, I might not know everything, and I know that I don't know everything, but what I do know is what you can do to improve your health. Okay. I mean, Linda, you're right. Okay. Look at this. This is kind of the competition. Okay. I think you guys would agree with this, right? This is kind of the competition that people have, right? I mean, seriously, how many of you are on any one of those? And I have to say, honest to God, I've never met another human being that would rather be on those things if they knew that there was something different. I sip on a very simple tea. It's a chlorogenic tea, and I sip on it every morning. And it does the same thing, V Queen, okay, as the medication that you're on, okay? It shuts the food noise off. It allows me to go longer periods of time without thinking about food. It literally shuts the food noise off. And sometimes we need that, right? Especially if you're trying to heal your gut from inside. Um, it can help you to do that. And Christine, I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, I donated a kidney and I only have one. So I've got to be very, very careful about what it is that I do and I eat so that I'm not affecting my one kidney, which is why I love sharing what I share. So what I use every day is just as effective as what doctors recommend and what doctors prescribe. There's no side effects, right? There's zero contraindications. And that's what I love, is because it's something that works with people's body, right? It works with your biology, not against it. And this is why, I think it's important for us to understand, okay, well, what's going on inside of our bodies and why are we having these issues, right? And most importantly, what are some things that we can start to do immediately that can give us the relief that we're looking for? Okay. I love what I do every day. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. It's simple, it's safe, it works, it's effective. And that's what this is all about, folks. Okay. I'm going to be on tomorrow morning. Actually, tomorrow. So normally I'm on at 7 o'clock in the morning. I will be on a little bit later just because I have somewhere that I have to be at 8 o'clock. But I might actually get on at 6:30 tomorrow morning and just do a short live. So I'll probably do that. I'll probably get on at 6:30 tomorrow morning, and that way I can spend some time and then maybe do another one in the afternoon. But folks, all of the information that I have is right in my bio. Okay, and you're welcome to connect. Feel free to send me a message. I'm happy to connect with each and every one of you if you have an interest in learning more. I really do appreciate those that came on this live tonight and tapped the screen and shared this with people. But I will be on here tomorrow morning, and if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. Okay, guys. God bless you.